So here's the NSPE, the National Society of Professional Engineers, Code of Ethics for Engineers. The first thing I want to clarify that it is my understanding that the intent behind this code is that it's not only supposed to apply to licensed professional engineers, PEs, that it is Code of Ethics for Engineers, and that's what it says. And that is what's taken for granted in the Board of Ethical Review cases that we'll be discussing. That not all the engineers whose ethics is examined in those cases is a PE. So I think that the idea is that the NSPE wanted to write a code of ethics that would apply to all engineers of all sorts. One of the things that is interesting about engineering is that there are multiple engineering societies, which makes sense given the importance of specialization in engineering, where to be a mechanical engineer as opposed to being a software engineer is a very, very different thing. So there are different professional societies for mechanical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, and each of them has its own specific code of ethics, which are very similar, I have to say. And if I'm not mistaken, all of them contain something like the first canon. But we'll take the Code of Ethics for Engineers from the NSPE as just the code. It's probably the best one. It's certainly the one that is most meaningful, I think. So let's just look at the structure of the thing a little bit. A document like this is not meant to be read straight through. It's a reference document. I think the idea is you get a sense of it, you look at its highlights, and then you use it as a reference. That is, if there is an ethical question, you look to the Code of Ethics to see if it gives you guidance. So you should familiarize yourself with the structure of it and the basic content of it, but it is not something that's meant to be read through. It's not an essay. The first thing we come across is the preamble, which is extremely interesting and important because there's some very telling language in it. Preamble says engineering is an important and learned profession. So first of all, there is this claim, which is the kind of the basic claim I'll be working with in this course, that engineering is a profession. I gave you an old video that I made asking the question, what is a profession? I hope that you look at it because you kind of have to have an idea of what the accepted traditional notion of a profession is to sort of deal with the question of engineering as a profession. But so take a look at that. The NSPE just says engineering is an important profession. And again, the idea is not that, well, PEs are professionals, but all engineers who don't have their license are not. No, all engineers are professionals in the sense that anyone who engages in engineering is a member of a profession. And so is a professional in that sense. Right? That's another reason to look at that video, the difference between the way that we use the word professional in general language and the way that we'll be using it in this course. Professional for this course means member of a profession of law, profession of medicine, profession of engineer, etc. It continues, as members of this profession, engineers are expected to exhibit the highest standards of honesty and integrity. Why? Well, what comes next is crucially important. Engineering has a direct and vital impact on the quality of life for all people. Accordingly, and that's an important link there, the accordingly, the therefore, the services provided by engineers require honesty, impartiality, fairness, and equity, and must be dedicated to the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare. So you see a certain logical argument being made there. The first is the claim that engineering has this direct and vital impact on the quality of life for all people. And therefore, right, accordingly, there are these ethical requirements. So there you have a very important claim being made, and that is that the kind of things that engineers typically do are so important and so widespread in their effects that they need to hold themselves to a certain standard of ethical accountability. And in that is really the whole basis for the claim, not only to a professional ethics, but to something being a profession at all. That is, for something to be a profession, it has to be in an area of life which has a unique importance to the welfare of the people who are come in contact or are affected by the person doing the thing. So, in medicine, the idea is that what doctors do is so important and so intimate that they need to be held to a high standard of ethics. Same with lawyers. With engineers, we'll see obviously there's some differences between the way that engineers typically work and the way that doctors and lawyers do, but there's a claim there. And the claim is not just that engineers do work that's important to their employers or clients, that they do work that's important to everybody because engineers work with technology. And to one degree or another, we're all exposed to technology. So we're all exposed to the work of engineers. So, on that basis, they need, the claim is, to hold themselves to a high level of ethical accountability. Engineers must perform under a standard of professional behavior that requires adherence to the highest principles of ethical conduct. So, that's a quite informative and interesting and dense preamble. It tells you a lot about what the idea is of engineering as a profession. So, what then follows is section one, fundamental canons. A canon is basically a principle, a first principle. A canon is a basic, assumed, axiomatic principle that is used to adjudicate situations, meant to be applied in specific situations. In a certain approach to ethics, we have our first principles, which we believe are taken for granted because they're obvious in terms of their truth, and then we try to apply those principles in specific situations using our judgment. But it starts with the canons or first principles, and there are six, really. Well, there are six. Engineers, in the fulfillment of their professional duties, are required to: one, hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. We shall return to that one. That's the first canon. That's the most important principle in engineering ethics. It is the heart and soul of engineering ethics, the hold paramount canon. Two, perform services only in areas of their competence. Three, issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. Four, act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees, also vitally important. And as we'll see, there is tension between the duty that is embodied in the fourth canon and the duty that's embodied in the first canon. Five, avoid deceptive acts. And then six, sort of like the catch all one, conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully so as to enhance the honor, reputation, and usefulness of the profession. Okay, so those are the six basic principles that serve as the foundation for this code of ethics, and therefore, at least in the conception of this code, for engineering ethics in general. Uh, Two, three, and five are definitely important. And if we had more time, which I wish we did, we could go into the kind of cases that involve those things. Performing services only in your area of competence, the issue of public statements, avoiding deceptive acts, and especially the avoiding deceptive acts, it will come up. But I'll tell you right now, especially in a 10-week introduction to engineering ethics, it's really canons one and four, which are the ones that we'll be spending most time discussing. One, again, because it's the whole paramount canon. It is the absolute heart and soul of engineering ethics. The duty to hold paramount, to make first in everything, the safety, health, and welfare of the public is not only the most important principle of engineering ethics, it is absolutely unique in terms of professional ethics. There is no such principle in medical or legal ethics, really, at least in what I've seen. That is, what makes engineering ethics different from those forms of professional ethics is that you won't see inscribed in their ethical codes a duty to the whole world, which is essentially what is being claimed here. The public is essentially the whole world, right? Doctors have responsibilities first and foremost to their patients, lawyers first and foremost to their clients. Engineers have duties to the whole world, and their paramount duty is to the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And again, the public is everybody. So that's really incredibly important. It's something we'll be discussing quite a bit in this course. And Canon 4, act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees, lays out another duty, right? To be of an agent or a trustee of someone is to act in their interest. And clients or employers, the idea is that we have to act, or we, I'm not an engineer, that you have to act as their agent to do everything in their interest. Now, it may not be that these two canons necessarily conflict, but it is thought in practice, and we'll definitely see cases, BER cases, Board of Ethical Review cases, in which the thing is painted as a conflict between these two duties. Can you always do both? And in cases where you can't do both, which one do you need to choose? I mean, that is not so obvious. I mean, the first canon is the first canon, but there's nothing in here that says that the first canon necessarily takes logical precedence over any other canon. So it's a problem. So yeah, learning the basics of this code means remembering what the canons say. And you should remember what all the canons say, but especially 1 and 4, and also, I think, secondarily 5. The other 3 are not going to come up. But you'll know the first canon, fourth canon will just become second nature to you. So what is the rest of the code? The rest of the code, well, we move on to section 2, rules of practice. And we see that every subsection of section 2 is a restatement of the first 5 canons. And then below that, um, specifications. So this is actually quite a valuable thing. What the section 2 does is it restates the canon. Right? You see there, subsection 1, engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And then what follows with the letters, the subsections, is specifications of that. Right? Some guidance in how those rules are to be applied. For instance, subsection A, if engineer's judgment is overruled under circumstances that endanger life or property, they shall notify their employer or client and such other authority as may be appropriate. So what basically telling you there is that part of what it means to follow the first canon is to act according, if your judgment as an engineer is overruled by your client or by your employer in a situation that endangers life or property, you've got to notify your employer of that, and you maybe have to notify other authorities, right, as may be appropriate. Um, Subsection F, engineers having knowledge of any alleged violation of this code shall report thereon to appropriate professional bodies, and when relevant, also to public authorities, right? So it's basically saying that part of upholding the first canon is in certain situations doing something, either simply making your employer or client aware of the situation, and as appropriate, making other bodies, government bodies, the news media, the public aware. So that's what you get in the second section. It's actually quite valuable. Um, specifications of the first five canons. Right? What does it mean to act, for instance, in the fourth canon as a faithful agent or trustee? Um, Sometimes it means maintaining confidentiality. Sometimes it means avoiding conflicts of interest. Sometimes it means not. Yeah, I mean, it tells you situations, which means what does it mean to avoid? So it gives you some guidance. Obviously, they're trying to give the engineer some help in how the canons are to be understood and applied. But of course, you can't make clear every possible situation. It's just some specification, but pretty much still leaving an enormous amount to your judgment. Section 3, professional obligations, is everything else. Right? That is, it was clear that this document, which has evolved over many decades, started out with the canons and their specification. Section 3 is sort of, you know, thinking, what did we leave out? Uh, Engineers shall be guided by the high standards of honesty and integrity. Engineers should at all times strive to serve the public interest. Um, should not be in. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff, but it's sort of like trying to cover the stuff that wasn't explicitly covered, perhaps, in the second section. The thing about a code of ethics like this is it is a living document. It has an origin and it has a history. And one thing I can tell you is that everything that's in this document is there for a reason. And the reason is that an engineer did something wrong. Right? I mean, if there's something in there about issuing public statements only in an objective and truthful manner, that's because in the history of engineering, some engineers have not done that. And they thought that it was necessary to enshrine that duty in a code of ethics. If there's something in there about conflict of interest, it's because engineers engaged in services to two different parties in a conflict of interest. So everything that's here is really here for a reason. And that reason is that it was thought necessary to inform engineers of what the limits were of their ethical behavior. So it's actually a really fascinating document. Um, as we'll see, we'll be spending a lot of time because, especially if looking at the Board of Ethical Review cases in referring to it.